Okay, this is my Sonex Onex Turbo, and let's see, it's 11:30 at almost 11 at night. I got a support crew coming over tomorrow, and I'm gonna fire this thing up. So right now I'm preparing, and I just added 2 quarts of oil to the crank or to the case, and then I'm gonna crank it a few times and get the oil through the system, and then I'm gonna mark my dipstick here, because 2 quarts is supposed to be my low mark. So I'm going to run the oil through it, crank it, and then I'll mark my dipstick here, and that'll be set for low. I've got some gas in the gas tank, but I haven't turned the gas on yet. So again, I'm just going to crank it. I got my spark plugs out of the bottom right here. And this is where it's at. I've got to add wiring in the wings to get the wingtip lights on. And what I'm going to end up doing, I think, is I'm going to do the vinyl. I looked into paint. Paint's super expensive. And I'm going to attempt the vinyl. So I'll do a vinyl where the yellow is, and I'll just do polish the aluminum where the silver is right here. And I think that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make it silver down here, so this will kind of thin the fuselage out. I'll be airbrushing the paint, airbrushing the airframe to make it look just a little bit thinner. I think the airplane looks kind of chubby, so hopefully that little scheme there will make it look thinner. So here's the turbo. Got a shoehorn to get it in there. I've had the counselor inspect this thing twice. The last time was for the electrical, and the electrical, they liked it, looked good. And I've gone through with my voltmeter, make sure I didn't ground anything out yet, and that's good. So yeah, the turbo. So what I ended up doing is I chopped about a ½ an inch or an inch off the collector tube right here, so it wasn't so the back of the tube wasn't hitting the frame right here, so I could have room back there. And so that gave me room there. And when I got this kit, a guy had already started it, so he already had the battery box mounted here. And I thought, shoot, I want the turbo. So once I got the turbo in, it's like, oh wow, you can't get the battery anywhere. So I cut open the door the side right here and just put hinges on it, so now I can slide the battery in and out right there. So that works pretty good. Let's see. I ended up going with the MGL Extreme little 4-inch display, and I went with the Prince carbon P-tip prop, and so that prop looks pretty fancy. So I'm going for as fast as I can go on this thing and see how fast this little VW can go. I got the official Brad Penn racing oil, and apparently it's got a bunch of zinc in it for the valve train to give it some lubrication. And let's see what else here. Everything's torqued. Got my prop on. It's torqued on. I ended up going with the oil separator and a return line on it, because I want to be able to go upside down and stuff like that. And so if I spill a lot of oil, I want to be able to recover it. So that worked out real nice. I got the oil separator, cut out aluminum plate, mounted the plate with the high temperature Adele clamps, and then mounted the oil separator to that. So the plate is mounted to the engine frame with the Adele clamps, and then the oil separator is mounted to that plate. And so it's somewhat level. That worked out good. I'm pretty happy with how this came out pretty clean. It was a little bit of a challenge to get this tube in here, but got some soft tube. It was pretty easy to bend, and this just lined up really nice. I'm happy with that. This is the computer, the RDAC for the MGL. Mounted it right there, and I got the over voltage protection right here, and the overvoltage relay right here. So I got just everything packed in here tight. And how I did it was I first mounted the turbo up here, and then had to figure out where the carburetor was going to fit. It's like, okay, I'll fit the carburetor there. So I had to cut this tube, cut the intake manifold right here, chop it off a bit, and then re-weld it so I'd have a good fit in here. And then once I had that mounted, I ended up using a Sharpie on the firewall to outline where everything was going to be. And so as you can see here, I got air filter, and then outline my gasculator, oil filter, and the tight spot here is the coils. I could have spread the coils apart a little bit better, and then the oil lines would have gone up between them a little bit better. And that would have been nice. If I would have had them just a little bit further apart, the oil lines would have just gone straight up right between them. That would have been nice. There's my main contactor right there, and right above the contactor is the regulator. So as I said, I put the carburetor and turbo up here first and outlined everything on the firewall with a Sharpie, so that way I'd know what everything was at, and then I could figure out where to put these items, gasculator, coils. And the coils, turns out that the wires from the Aero V engine are just long enough to perfectly reach these coils right here. So these coils had to be about this height, centered on the firewall pretty much, or on the engine, and then these things fit pretty good. So that worked good. Let's see. This oil return line here, that works good. I'm happy with that. My technical counselor, he suggested getting this fire sleeve stuff. He's really afraid of the turbo heat in this area. So I got the fire hose on it. For tomorrow when I start it, I'm just going to leave the air filter off. Because if this pours out gas, backfires, and catches fire, I don't want my air filter catching on fire and soaking up all that gas as well. Just be all this metal stuff here. Tonight I'll do my fuel flow check and make sure my mixture turns off the fuel flow. And I've already checked my throttle. My throttle's connected up good. This is a really tight fit against the cowl right here. So my throttle comes out right here, and I ended up using a modified motorcycle throttle curve right here, so I could just curve it right into the carburetor good and fit between the cowling and be on top of the oil separator. The mixture, you can see right here, I ended up I've got a mill over there, so I ended up machining a different mount for my mixture cable, because it's just a super duper tight fit right here, a really tight bend coming out of here, and if I put it through the original cable mount, it would bind up too much and I wouldn't get smooth motion. So I had to remake this little mount here, and this gives it a smooth enough motion to where I can control the mixture. Let's see. And it ended up being the mixture screw, the hole for the throttle cable, or for the mixture cable, was a little bit off, so I've kind of got this wired up backwards to make it move easily. Let's see what else. Right now I've got my battery connected, but I have the starter disconnected right now, so I don't want to have any accidental things until I'm ready. So yeah, that's there's my wiring harness. Got these Adele clamps here holding all that nice and firm. Let's see, the RDAC wanted a ground right to the block, so here's the RDAC's ground right to the block. And the Aero V said something about using these prongs to ground it right here, and I wasn't real happy with that, so I ended up soldering a wire on right here. Let's see what else. Here's my fuel gauge tacked right on here. I ended up using these blind nuts or nut plates. I use nut plates on the whole firewall because there's no way I'm going to crawl underneath the gas tank in there and hold any nuts for anything, except for I think my gasculator has nuts on the back of it. That's the only thing that has nuts. I had to take the oil filter off once and hold the nuts, and that was the last time. So I put nut plates on the back of that so I wouldn't have to do that again. So everything else, coils, regulator, the RDAC, all have nut plates on the back because I don't want to have to hold nuts at all, because I knew I'd be putting things on, taking them off at least 3 times. So the engine's been on and off probably 5 times. I planned on 3 times. The 4th time was frustrating. The 5th time was really irritating because then I'm wearing out my high temp nuts and having to buy more parts. So finally got through all that stuff, and I think it's permanent. I've got it on there permanent now. I'm going to fire it up tomorrow. And so at least it's getting closer to permanent. So my wiring, so I got the couple of USB and a cigarette lighter, spare one there. What was that? My fuel one, my EFIS, my compass, and my fuel. Oh no, fuel's right there. EFIS and compass. There's my coils. Here's my alternator. There's my master. And I just have one solid bus strip supplying 12 volts to everything right there. And that's my little MGL. Let's see what else. So far so good. I went with ended up going with lower compression because they recommended if you go with the turbo, you want to just go run lower compression on the piston. So I lowered the compression. And like I said, tomorrow when I fire this thing up, I'm just going to leave the wastegate here open, so the turbo is not going to be a factor in firing this engine up and tuning the carburetor. So it's just it'll be strictly carbureted with no turbo effect. And that was a suggestion by my counselor, Ernie Moreno. I don't know, I guess he does all of Oregon. He's in Independence, and he came all the way down here to Eugene to check my plane out twice so far. I appreciate that. Okay, let's look at the MGL. So I got this kit. I got this kit started already. It was the quick build kit, and so the previous guy, he had already done the control surfaces and the controls, and so I had no idea what a quick build kit was. And there's a quick build kit. That's how it's delivered right there. So there's the fuselage, and then there's the wings, and that's how a quick build kit gets delivered. So there was a lot done. The tail feathers, my counselor, he really liked the work that the previous owner had done on the tail feathers. He was impressed by that. Got my voltmeter here, and so I've got a little mini switch there that fits right in with all the rest of my switches. That's my main contactor. So I pop that on, and I should have power to my bus, which I will. Pop it on. Power to my bus. My alternator light's on, and so alternator's right here. And when I hit the alternator, that light goes out. So that's working. That's the overvoltage system right there. So that's that. Okay. There's my little MGL. It's basically the size of my phone. So let's flip that sucker on. There it's coming up. And this light will also be alarms from the MGL. So that's the alternator alarm, and then this light will be whatever alarms I have configured here. So what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm going to do tonight is, like I said, I got 2 quarts of oil in there. I'm going to crank it over a few times, and hopefully I'm going to get my oil pressure to come up. And so here we got batteries at 12.2. Oil temperature says 78, which right now it's 11 o'clock at night and it's finally getting below 80. Yeah. Oil pressure is at 0. Outside air temperature says 78. So yeah, it's finally cooling off. Fuel level says 0. And actually I've got about, I put a gallon in it. So I put 1 gallon in it and I marked it 1 gallon on the ground. That way, and when I level the tail, perhaps I guess maybe I'll mark 1 gallon in the air. I don't know if that'll be useful information or not, but it seemed like a good idea. There's my trim. I angled my trim a little bit because I had to it made it easier to get this gas tank in and out. It was a really tight squeeze right here, so I angled it, and that gets the cable was also running into the gas tank, so I had to angle it, and that's a tight squeeze, but it fits. So then I got alternator, coils, mags, avionics, lights, and all my circuit breakers. And again, my 12 volts and USB and air. And my throttle quadrant looks pretty nice. It took a bit of modifying here and readjusting to get it so the door will close and get my fingers up here good. So there's mixture off, mixture full. It's like I said, it moves pretty smoothly, so I'm happy with that. So there's off, and my throttle, full throttle and full closed. So that it all fits in here real nice. At least so far it does, and I can get my hand on this. It's a little bit of a tight squeeze right here. I don't like this edge they left on this. They got a nice knurled grip here, but then they left an edge on this, the back side here, so I'm going to end up putting that in my mill and shaving all that back edge off because it's kind of sharp when you get your hands on it. Let's see. Flaps up. Got some serious air brakes there. And then the previous owner, he got the hydraulic brakes, so it doesn't take much. I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll remove this arm and mount a bicycle brake lever right here and just mount it mechanically down there to pull on this thing. And that'll be just convenient to have my brake right here on my stick. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so it's coming along. Here, I'll get down in here. I'll close the hood, and it'll be a little bit of a tight fit with my quadrant over here. There. Get my hood down. There. So yeah, I got just enough room here for my throttle quadrant and my mixture and my flaps and my brakes. So that's good. This is good. This is good. Or this way. I'll figure out which way I want to go. And then this. It's good. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. Full off. Flaps. Brakes. Doesn't take a whole lot to activate the brakes, just a little bit. Mixture rich. I love it. It's working good. Okay, let's see what else we got here. I don't know all the ins and outs of this display yet. There's my VFR screen. Airspeed, vertical airspeed, altimeter, GPS compass, And there's my, it's crossed out because I didn't buy the AHRs yet. So that's another $700 to have my artificial horizon. I ended up going with Magellan because the Garmin G5 and the Dynon 10, I think, they didn't have the engine monitoring features. So this one computer gave me everything, including the AHRs if I want to upgrade later. So I've got my EGT here, and it's going to cycle through to my CHTs. Let's see, 68. There's CHTs at 68. So that's good. 68, they're all reading 68, and that's on the engine block. Oil temperature 78, oil pressure 0. So I'm going to get ready to crank this thing over, and we're going to watch and see if my oil pressure comes up. So that is the inside of the Onex turbo. Let's go look at something else here. Okay, I've got the starter connected, but like I said, I haven't run any gas to the gasculator, and I've got all 4 bottom spark plugs pulled out, so I don't have to worry about this thing igniting. I'm going to crank it over and watch the oil pressure come up. And like I said, I have only 2 quarts of oil in it right now, so I want to get that oil down to the filter down there and into the rest of the system, and then I will mark my dipstick for my 2-quart setting. So let's crank this thing over and we'll see if we get some oil pressure. Contactors on. I'll wait for my my MGL to come up, and I'll get where I can see my oil pressure. Then we'll crank this baby over. I'll leave my alternator coils and mags off, and the manual says I can crank for 10 seconds, rest for 20, crank for 10, rest for 20. Do that cycle 6 times, and then I have to let it set for about half an hour to cool off the starter. So let me get to my oil pressure. There we go. And clear prop. Okay, we'll let it rest for 20 seconds. Okay, clear prop. I'll start my timer. I'll set my timer up here for 10 seconds. For 20 seconds. Still don't have oil pressure coming up. Alright, we got oil pressure. I ended up putting my compass right here. They said, oh, don't put it by any metal and stuff. Well, this plane is so small, and there's my control rod right there, and of course I'll be sitting right here with a plate that goes down right here. So, and I wasn't exactly sure if this has to be on the rotating axis, or if I can actually mount this up higher. I could put it back there or something like that. Anyhow, there's metal everywhere in this plane, so getting it away from metal is a little bit of a challenge. Okay, turn my contactor on. There's contactor. Turn my MGL on. So it took, what, 3 hits of the starter to get my oil pressure to finally come up. So let's see, does this screen have my oil pressure? Let's see, ground speed, true airspeed, indicated airspeed. What else we got here? 12 volts, 78 degrees. There's my heading bug. That's kind of cool. My altimeter. So I crank my altimeter. This knob is always altimeter on this screen. And actually, I'm not sure what elevation I'm sitting at right now. Vertical airspeed. And okay, oil pressure. All right. So let's watch this sucker come up. Okay, contactor's on, and start. All right. Oil pressure came up. I got it set on bar, so now I'm gonna have to go inside of this screen and change it to PSI, and look in the manual and see what PSI it's supposed to be reading at. All right. So here, we'll watch the prop from back here, and we'll flip the start button after let it set for another couple seconds. All right, let's give it a shot. Alright, fun stuff. Contactor off. 12 volts is off. Now I'll go figure out how to change this screen to PSI and see what kind of PSI we're getting out of it. Okay, here we go. Go down here to menu at the bottom. Select that. And I want to do, there's my EFIS setup, my flight system. And there's my EMS engine system setup. So let's go change my oil temperature, oil pressure from bar to PSI. So I scroll over there, and now go to oil pressure. Scroll over there, and then it's on bar. Pressure units will go down to bar, and select that, and change it to PSI. And everything changes to PSI. Exit. And now we have oil pressure and PSI. And let's crank this baby and see what we get. Okay, clear prop. (133 psi). I don't know if that's right or not. I'll go look in the manual and see what it's supposed to be. Okay, it says my oil pressure minimum is 10 psi, hot oil idle RPM maximum of 100 psi. And I was reading 133 psi, so I'm going to have to either calibrate the engine monitoring system or see here, because here's my pressure transducer right up top here, so that's good. So now I got to make sure I don't have a blockage in any of this. So now I'm going to pull my oil filter and make sure my oil filter is full of oil, and also I'm going to pull my turbo sump. I got a turbo sump. I'm going to pull the return line on the turbo sump. And so let's see. So there's my turbo sump right up here. And this is my return line from my turbo sump. So I'm going to pull this off and make sure I got oil coming out of here, and that'll tell me I've got oil in the oil filter, oil coming out of here. But this is my oil pump, so I got lots of pressure, so I must have oil coming out of here. So perhaps the readings are so high is because I've still got lots of engine grease, pre-grease in the gears here. It's not hot, so it hasn't used up all that extra engine grease. I'm not sure. Or like I said, I have to calibrate the my EMS. See if there's something involved in that. But anyway, I'm really super pleased with how this package, I was able to fit it in here. It's a tight fit, it's a lot of stuff going on. The cowling fits fine, and all this equipment in here fits good, and the turbo's in. The only thing people are afraid of is the heat from the turbo affecting other items, and so far there's been no reports of this heat affecting the other stuff. And I called MGL on the RDAC and asked them about heat, and they said as long as there's some airflow in here, it'll be fine. And this particular cowl, the tops portion does not snap in back here. So there's a gap back here that will let the extra heat out while I'm taxiing as well. So that's good. So I'm going to go figure out what's up with the oil pressure. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my mixture cutoff stops the gas. So I'm not going to start anything, but I'm going to turn on my gas tank, the fuel valve. That's going to fill up my gascolator, and then I'm going to, right now my mixture's at cutoff. I've got the throttle full open, so the gas should pour right out the needle. There's no float here. So the gas should pour right out the needle valve and dump right here on the floor. And I'm going to test my mixture cutoff and make sure that sucker works. So here goes that test. Ooh. So my mixture's at full cutoff, my throttle is full. I'm going to reach under here and turn on my gas, and it's going to fill up my gascolator. Okay, gas is on. Let's see, the gascolator should be filling up. My mixture cutoff is still off, so there should be no gas coming out of my carburetor. Actually, I've only got 1 gallon of gas inside the tank. So it's got to be higher than, since gravity feed, yeah, it's higher. So you can see the blue line there, my gas level. It's higher than my Aero V, barely. So let's check my gascolator here. Come on, focus. Thank you. Okay, check my gascolator. There we go. Filled right up. So gascolator. My technical counselor already did the fuel flow test right here. I forget it, like had to be 15 gallons an hour, and I got 25 gallons an hour or 25 gallons a minute, something like that. Came out plenty fast. Okay, I think my gascolator is getting full. So now, and let's turn on my mixture control and see if gas comes pouring out here. Here it goes. And full rich. Okay, we're making a mess. All right, let's turn it off. And good. I think my mixture control works. Turned off the gas, the throttle is stopped, the gas flow stopped. Let's try that again, that was fun. Again, my throttle slide here is full open, and so I'm just running gas straight into here, through the needle, out to the ground, just to confirm that my mixture control cutoff is working. And obviously it is. So let's do that again. That was just fun. So, mixture rich. Alright, we're pouring gas out like crazy. Making a mess. And shut it off. Oh, still leaking? There we go. Okay, throttle cut off. Okay, let's see what else we got going on here. I'm noticing gas coming out up here. I'm not sure what that's all about. I guess since I've got the throttle wide open, the engine's not running, so some of the gas is spewing on top of the slide and coming out here on top of the slide. If the engine was running, all this gas would be sucked up the carburetor instead of coming out the slide right here. So let's try that again, see what kind of mess we get. I just want to be aware of what might happen here. So now that I closed it, it's starting to drip right here. So now I'm going to close the throttle and I'm going to open the mixture full and see if that needle allows gas to travel up on top here. If there's something funny going on here and gas gets over here, for some reason, if there's gas pulling in here, if there's a potential for a fire, I just want to be ready for that. So okay, I'm going to go mixture rich. My throttle slide is closed. My mixture is going to go rich. So it's going to fill up gas on top of, let's see, is it going to go on top of my throttle slide? Well, my idle setting is just a very slight opening right here, so maybe it won't. So let's go full rich. There's full rich. No gas is coming out. I'm a little afraid. Well, I know there's a gap there because I have my idle setting to hold the slide open. So I know this whole thing is not, the Aero carburetor is not filling up with gasoline. The needle is stopping the flow. So I'm going to go mixture lean, and then I'm going to go full throttle and see if any gas dumps out. Alright, so mixture cut off. So there, my mixture's cut off. So now I'm going to go full throttle and see if there's any pooling of gas someplace. So here goes, full throttle. So it puked out a little bit of gas out this hole right here. And that's the back side of the throttle slide. Hopefully that's hopefully that's not a problem, but like I said, once the engine's running, all the fuel flow is going to be up into the carburetor and not sitting around here. So my main test was, does my mixture cutoff turn the gas off? And as you can see, gas is off. We made a bit of a mess, but oh, avgas smells so good. Okay. All right, mixture cutoff test work done. That was a really good test. I'm happy. Like I said, mixture is working. It cut it off. So when I cut my mixture off, the engine will turn off. All right. So let's see, mixture's off. So I'm going to turn my fuel valve off. Okay, July 16th, 2018. This is going to be an exciting year. So, our startup procedure. What I did was I summarized the information from the Aero Injector manual and the turbo startup manual. And basically the turbo startup procedure is look for oil pressure, idle for 3 minutes to get oil circulated. Once that's going, spin the motor up to 1600, 2000 RPM, and check the coil timing, the ignition, electronic ignition timing by turning off the mags. It should be less than 50 RPM drop. And then last thing is you tune the carburetor, and then you're done. So that, as well as the startup checklist, and that's my summary. And basically I wanted to make sure I don't exceed my temperatures. Oil pressure 100 psi max, oil temperature 240 max, CHT 450 max, EGT 1400 max. 1. Start it and idle for 3 minutes to make sure there's oil's circulating and let it heat up to 100 Fahrenheit. 2. Check the timing on the electronic ignition. Turn off the mags, I should say mags, and the RPM should be changed to be less than around 50 RPM. And finally, you tune the carburetor. And how you tune the carburetor is you run the engine full throttle and then pull to peak lean from full rich, and your exhaust temperatures should change by about 100 degrees. And so you adjust the carburetor from full rich to peak lean to get this temperature change. So if you're not getting this temperature swing, like if it's like only changing 50 degrees, then your Aero Injector is not rich enough. If it's changing 200 degrees, then your Aero Injector is set too rich. So this is how you tune the carburetor. It's a lot to read to understand, but it's pretty simple. And that's our startup goal for today. If we can get through all that, that'll be awesome. But if not, we hopefully just get the thing started. So here it goes. You sat all night with gas and oil in it, and no oil leaks. I mean, all I did was just spin it up, so that's good. No oil leaks and no gas leaks. So that's a good sign. Our plumbing is good there. And check inside here, make sure no gas leaks in there. I don't smell any gas, that's a good sign. And looks pretty clean. Alright. No leaks. Let's get this thing out of here. I had to put the garage extension in here because it wouldn't quite fit, so just pulled the plug on the garage door opener so it never opened back up, and get a whole bunch of OSB and extend the garage. So I got a bigger garage now because half the garage here is shared with the mutts. Huh, puppy? So the poodles get that half of the garage. Oh, 8:15. Getting ready to fire this thing up. There's Les helping me out this morning. Hi, Les. We got the plane out of its home for the last 3 years. There's Lynn, the supervisor. Hi, Lynn. And there is the machine. Gonna start right here on the front lawn. We'll see how this goes. Okay, start out with a oil pressure check and make sure oil pressure comes up with the plugs out. Oh, my voltage on my battery. Oh, shoot. I should have charged it last night. Hit it one more time, yeah. Ross. Put my spark plugs in. Okay, let me show you my cool little checklist. Spark plugs are in, coil, mag, and start.
Yep.
Woo! Here it goes.
They pull a pin out of this thing.
My nail.
So, do you want me to hose you down first? Or you just...
I'll be the one that's on fire first. Okay. Throttle's off. There's throttle's idle. And contactor on. Wrong one. alternator, coils, mags, and mixture rich. Here we go. All back, rich, and start. Okay, battery's working good. I got to turn fuel on. Mixture off. Fuel on. Okay, fuel's on. Now we're getting closer. Battery's pulling good. And mixture rich. And pro prop. And go. Okay, running really rough. Alright, I'm going to pull the mixture all the way off. And I'm going to see if it's going to start again, if it feels like it's really rich. Alright, maybe it's lean. Mixture rich. And start. Okay, startup went awesome, and like I said, I had the turbo disconnected, so the wastegate was open, so the turbo wasn't a factor today. It's a good thing I checked last night that the mixture cutoff worked, because it turns out my mag switch and my coil switches did not work. So obviously I didn't check my wiring good enough. I checked the 12 volts to make sure I wasn't shorting anything out, but I did not confirm that my mag switches and coil switches were working properly. The manual said that when you cut the electronic ignition, the coils, there should be no RPM change running off the mags. But it said that when you cut the mags out and you're just running on the coils, there should be 50 RPM or less drop. Well, what happened was, when I cut the coils out, my electronic ignition, my RPM dropped 150 RPM about. It dropped 100, that's when I cut my coils. So in theory, I should have been just running on my mags, and they said when I run on just my mags, the RPM should not drop. Now when I turned off just my mags, nothing happened. Everything stayed the same RPM. So I assume, my assumption is, cutting my mags did not do anything, but cutting out my coils, for some reason, actually disconnected my mags. I don't know what's going on, so I have to investigate, figure out what happened. And like I said, my mixture cutoff worked fine, so that killed the engine. So that was the one thing I was sure of. But my RPM wiring, my mag wiring, and my coil electronic wiring is not wired right. So now I have to troubleshoot that, figure out what's wrong, and then I'll have to go back to the RPM drop that I experienced, which was 150 RPM drop. So I'm assuming that's going to be my timing on my electronic ignition. So that is the recap of the start, and other than that, it purred like a kitten. I'm very happy. Everything was wired the way I understood the manual. I thought for sure my mag kill wire was bouncing around behind the panel back there. That's why it was kind of really rough. But it's all the way I thought it should be, so it's going to take a little bit more investigation. That's all for now.